Hello, my name is Judelle Niemeyer, and I would like to welcome you to the second installment of QuiltWorks Work Sessions, a series of 3 online videos featuring Judy Niemeyer teaching you the amethyst quilt pattern. If you have not already done so, we highly recommend that you watch the previously uploaded videos, including a short description of what a work session is, a workshop on preparing for your amethyst workshop, a video on how to use Quiltster as a tool to color your amethyst design, and finally, part 1 and part 2 of the first work session, which teaches you how to make the Moonstar elements for your quilt. To find all of these videos nicely organized in the order that they should be watched, you can visit the quiltworks.com website, click on Products, the Amethyst pattern, then on the right side there is a link under the Technique Used header that says Online Workshop. Please click there to find all of the videos in order. After today's workshop, we will add this video to the list as well, so you can easily reference back to all of them whenever you need. In addition to the workshop page, don't forget to check corrections on the pattern page for Amethyst, join the QuiltWorks support network to ask questions along the way or keep in touch with others making the project, and join the event page for details on shops that may be hosting coinciding events or workshops for their customers. If you have not purchased the pattern and kit at this time but you would like to, the shops that are listed as co-hosts on the event page will help you with getting a pattern and fabrics in the colorway of the cover quilt or possibly even one of their own. You can also purchase just the pattern at your local quilt shop or through quiltworks.com by clicking on the pattern page, then choosing Buy Now. If you have been working along with us since September 15th when we launched the first class, you will have likely completed all of your Moonstar blocks. Congratulations! Here are images of where those blocks are located in the quilt. There are 2 colorways shown here. The first is for the cover quilt, and the second is for the colorway that Judy is making in her tutorials. Don't forget, the kitting information for both options is included on the pattern page for Amethyst on our website. For today's class, there are some special tools that we highly recommend you purchase. They are not required, but are very helpful in trimming the curved seams and edges in this block perfectly. They are the 12-inch Creative Grids Wave Ruler and the Quick Ripper. You can find these tools on the QuiltWorks website and at your local quilt shop as well. Finally, we will be working on the second diamond block in your design referred to as the woven star. There are 2 woven star packages in your pattern and each one makes 8 blocks. Note that some of the yardage for certain strips are shared between both booklets. If, during the cutting process, you have noticed that fabrics AL3 and AL4 require 3 strips per the strip cutting table on page 3 of the Amethyst booklet, but each booklet says you need 2, which might suggest a total of 4 strips, it is because each strip actually yields 6 pieces, so only 3 are required for the 16 blocks in the pattern. Likewise, fabrics AL14 and AL15 are listed in the strip cutting table as one 13.5-inch and one 15.5-inch strip respectively. However, each booklet says you need 1 strip, inferring that you could need 2. This is because each strip can yield 16 pieces, so we elected to save you yardage for your project by sharing across the booklets. Judy will address this further in her cutting tutorial so it makes more sense. It is also covered on page 2 of the Amethyst booklet under Helpful Hints if you want to review this information. Today's workshop runs approximately 1 hour. Please note that while she covers this block thoroughly, we have tried not to repeat too much of the basic information that you learned in Work Session 1, which can apply to this block as well. If you feel like you are missing something along the way, please feel free to post a question or go back and review the first work session videos to obtain a thorough understanding of the process. Thank you for joining us for the second work sessions class. It is time to join Judy in the workshop.
get started on our second series of the Amethyst quilt. I'm going to go over some things with you to start with about what's in the pattern, the foundation papers, and also go over the fabric cutting. You guys should already have your fabrics cut out if you use the pre-cutting instructions that Judel set up for you. And then we're going to go in and we're going to cover paper piecing again, and then some curve piecing before the day is over. All right. So let's start with the pattern. When you guys open up the pattern, today we are going to be working with two booklets. So you're going to have two different booklets in your pattern like this, okay? And each booklet has your foundation papers and your template pieces in there. Today we're not going to show you how to cut the foundation papers, but I'm going to go over what's on them a little bit for you. In the last class we actually went through a demonstration on how to cut out foundation papers and templates as well. So I've done quite a bit of pre-work for this class so that we can just skip into setting up all of the strips for paper piecing, all right? In one of these booklets, both of these booklets are exactly the same. Each one makes 8 units for the woven star. And the way they're set up on the Quiltster, both of these are colored exactly the same way. So when you cut out all of your fabrics, you should have enough to do 16 units unless you change the instructions a little bit. I would, or your coloring instructions. If I was you, I would actually work on one booklet and then come back and work on the second booklet, because the instructions are really set up to follow for one booklet, all right? However, in Quiltster will calculate your yardage for 2, 3, 4 booklets if you have that many, and it'll give you a total yardage for all 4. So if you're doing 8 pieces, you may need 1 strip of fabric, or you might need 2 strips of fabric. If you're doing 2 booklets, you might only need 3 strips of fabric, because Quiltster's going to calculate that you had enough leftover fabric from your first booklet to finish up the cutting for the second booklet. And the only time that won't happen is if you went in and actually changed the colors and did both booklets a different color when you designed your quilt, colored your quilt, all right? So I'm going to take this booklet and set it aside. And when you actually read in here, the very first thing it's going to do is show you what your foundation papers and your template layout sheets are actually looking at, like when you open them up, okay? So on the first page, it's got general information what's in there. If you're doing 2 booklets at the same time, you might as well cut all your papers together, stack them together, rather than cut one batch and then the other batch, all right? That will just save you a lot of time, right? So when you open up your papers, if you actually look here, check your NP numbers right here, and you're going to look right up here, and it's going to tell you that you should have 2 pages. So that's the first thing you want to do anytime you actually open up a pattern. And then the other thing you want to check, it said I was supposed to have 2 sheets of it, which I do, and then it told me I should have 1 sheet of $3.99 and 1 sheet of $400, which I do have that as well, all right? So I'm not going to cut these out because I've already cut them out for you, so you know what's in there, all right? After you get through all of the cutting out, remember that when you're doing your templates and template layout sheets, you cut them out right on the line. When you're doing the foundation papers, you're going to cut them out a little bit past the line. I usually leave about 1/8 of an inch around each unit, okay? After you get down to the bottom, and there's going to be a diagram on your page here, and in that diagram it tells you where all of your colors are set up. Now, if you did your pre-cutting off of the instructions Judel gave you, you're going to have each one of your strips are going to have a little label here that tells you what that strip is for. And when you look at this picture right here, this graphic, it's actually going to tell you where I think that's A1L or AL1 actually goes for the fabric, all right? So you're going to reference back to this quite a few times as you go through this quilt, all right? I need to put my glasses on. All right, so now when we go to page 2, one of the things I did already is I set up my color chart here so that as I'm going through and doing the cutting, it kind of keeps me in track of what I'm actually doing for my strips. And then when you get into the cutting instructions, if your strips are already pre-cut, all we have to do is match the templates up to the strips as we go. And that's where I'm going to actually start with the demonstrations, is showing you how to match up. And I'm going to do just a little bit of cutting to get you started, but then I'm going to move past the cutting. I don't want you to have to watch me cut for an hour to cut this quilt out, because all I need to do is just demo a few little things for you. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually look at our strip set, and we're going to pull our fabrics over here. And they should be in order right now. So fabric AL1 should be on top, and then you should have fabric AL2 underneath it, AL3, AL4, and so on until you get to the very last piece, which is fabric AL15. As you work through your cutting instructions, they are all set up in order as well. So we're going to just start with the very first piece, and when we get to the last piece on our instructions, the last part of the cutting, we're on the very last piece. So everything's very organized for you. So don't get undone over reading through and trying to understand what you're doing. So for fabric AL1, that's the very first step. It tells me that I'm supposed to cut one 3-inch strip. Well, I already have my 3-inch strip set up, and one of the things you want to make sure of is that you always have your fabric stacked right side up, because our template pieces are actually going to sit on the right side of the fabric. So we have to open up our strips like this, okay? Now I'm going to grab my templates that I already pre-cut, and I'm going to show you how to lay this out. So all I need to do is look at my diagram here right at the bottom, and it tells me how to cut those out. I like to look at each one of these before I start cutting, because it's going to tell me how much fabric I have left over. And if I have quite a bit of fabric left over on each strip, I don't have to be really careful with my cutting. But if it's a really tight fit, and it shows you that on the graphics, then you're going to want to pay attention to how close you cut those, right? So basically this one just tells me I need to set this up, and I'm going to start on this corner here so that I'm following the picture, and all I have to do is just come in here and cut a strip. Now, I like to cut lots of layers at one time, but sometimes we just don't have lots of layers to work with. So what I'm going to do is just take this and come up with kind of a general size for this template, and then after I get my size set up, I'm just going to go through and cut a whole bunch of pieces that are close to that size, and I just keep stacking like this. And I have to kind of count as I'm doing this to make sure that I don't short myself or that I don't come out with too many pieces, right? So we're at 5, I believe, right now. This is going to be 6. This is 7. This one is 8. I believe so. I'm just going to recount. 2, 4, 6, 7. No, I need one more. Okay. So now after I get that stacked, all I have to do is just come in here and just sort of clean off around there. I like to clean it up just a little bit, and it just helps me when I'm working with my foundation papers not to have a lot of excess there. All right, so that's basically what you're going to have to do. Each one of these is a single strip. All right, then I just put my paper clip on it. The next thing I'm going to do is I want to show you, before I go any further, when I'm actually working with a pattern, I like to take all my template pieces and get them sorted out, because sometimes I don't have enough time to get through all of the cutting. So I like to take these pieces and clip my template pieces to all of my fabric as I go. Okay, so this really helps me, because now if I have to leave it, I don't have to worry about everything getting mixed up, or I don't have to remember where I left off. And it allows me to do my cutting as I go through the whole thing. So I'm not going to do any more cutting. I am going to show you though, now that I have everything put in order, something else that really helps, especially when I'm working with beginners, is to be able to see where the fabrics are actually going to go on your foundation papers. So as you cut everything out, as you do your cutting, just take a little piece of fabric and glue onto the foundation paper as you go. And that way when you start doing your paper piecing, you're going to be familiar with the colors that you should be picking up as you're going through your pile. Okay, so this will be the first piece on my on the top of my stack when we start our paper piecing. All right, so I do want to go through some cutting for the last two pieces. So we're going to skip through the cutting on all of the strip pieces for the Lone Star. And I'm just going to set these aside, and I want to show you how these pieces work right here. So these are for the curved unit that goes around here. So you have one that's sewn onto the foundation paper, and then you have the other one that finishes off the diamond star that is added after the foundation paper has been trimmed. Okay, so the very first, the template units for AL, it's unit AL, it tells you that you need to open up your fabric like this. And we only gave you one template in this pattern. Sometimes we give you a whole bunch of templates to work with, and sometimes we give you one. And we have to decide when we're actually designing the pattern which is going to be the best way for you to work through it. And if we feel like it's going to save you time to give you a template piece for every piece, then we will do that. If it's something we feel like you can actually just stack and cut a whole bunch of them out at one time, then we'll only give you one template piece per, instead of 8. So this one is actually a double template layout sheet, and basically it tells me that I have to put this on the wrong side of the fabric, and that I'm going to glue it to the wrong side of the fabric. That's going to keep it attached to the fabric. So what I want to do is, it has a whole bunch of stuff in the middle here, and that's just a scrap area. So instead of getting a bunch of glue on the back of my fabric, all I have to do is just run my glue down the middle of that, because that's going to be waste anyway. And I'm going to glue that on here. And I'm going to position the template just the first time on there, and then I'm going to come in and I'm going to cut this. And I'm going to cut both sides. And I am on the wrong side. I know it's hard to tell when you're actually on a batik. And on this one it wouldn't make any difference anyway. So we're going to take the next piece. And we're just gonna cut another one. And you can see I'm not too worried about where that I have a really perfect cut. And since I have quite a bit of fabric left over, I'm actually gonna move this over to this end, and then I don't have to spend 10 minutes pressing all of those folds out of the fabric. And there's plenty of room for me to work with. So then we're gonna take that one, and we're gonna stack it one more time. And now we're done with that piece. Now I'm going to take a paper clip, and I'm actually going to put a couple paper clips on the outside of each one of these units. I'm going to roll this around. Alright, so I have a ruler here, and when we designed the Creative Grids Wave Ruler, we actually designed it for another book that we are published. But one day I was messing around with this, and I'm like, I wish I had a curved ruler that worked for this curve. And I got to thinking, I wonder if this would work. And I'm not sure why it works, because we didn't intend for it to work, but it's a perfect fit. So you can actually use your wave ruler and set this down. And you have two lines. You have a cut line 1 and a cut line 2. But cut line 1 actually stops right where cut line 2 comes in. And so if we cut all the way around on that, we're going to cut the tip off of our second piece. So we can only do a partial cut for cut line 1. So I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to lay it down right along the inside of that line there. I'm going to turn it this way because it fits just about perfect here. And then I'm just gonna, all I have to do is just roll this just a little bit to get that cut. And now we're gonna roll it around this way. And I'm gonna take my ruler again, set it on top here. And we're just gonna take and finish cutting this piece. Alright, so now what we have to do is just come back in and finish cutting right along that end there. And that's how we actually cut these out. So what we're trying to do here is we have an inside curve cut that we have to use for the foundation when we put it on the foundation paper. It doesn't matter how much excess I have here. All that matters is I get the right curve for our pieces. All right. So when you're doing the cutting for these, the other pieces just like that. This one, I'm not going to cut that out for you. And then the next thing I want to show you is, this is the next template, which is T-Template AL1. We've actually given you 8 separate pieces, and these are the outside. And we decided after making our first one that we needed to give you enough paper templates to cut them out individually, because you really need an accurate cut on this. You can't just have something that slips. So again, what we did here is we're going to take our fabric, we're going to open it up, and it tells me to put these on the wrong side of the fabric. So I'm going to grab my glue stick, and I'm going to just kind of hold it up and take a look at where all of that hatching is, because that's all waste. And I can kind of see it from the back. And I'm going to put these pieces on like this. Right? I get some glue on there. And then we put that piece on. Then we're going to take this one, and we're going to do the same thing here. I'm going to put one more. Right? Okay, so I have these two glued on. And notice that there's a lot of fabric left over here. And in Quiltster, it tells you that you only need 1 strip of fabric. And so if you're doing 8, you would have to have 1 strip of fabric. If you're doing 2, there's actually enough fabric left over that you can use this strip. So it's not gonna tell you you need 2 strips, all right? So this piece has to be cut off and saved. So I'm just going to cut right along this line. And then we're just going to fold it up. and set it aside, and we'll come back to it. Alright, so now that I have these pieces done like this, the other thing that I need to show you, and I like to get these done right when I'm doing my cutting rather than come back and have to take care of this after we start sewing, is I need to come in and do a bunch of sewing on our TRP lines, okay? And so these TRP lines are really important in this particular pattern, because when you set these up, these are traditionally cut, so there's no excess fabric on these template pieces. So these TRP lines are going to match up exactly onto the foundation paper so that when you sew it on, you have a perfect fit, all right? So to do that, now that it's glued, all I have to do is just come over here, and I'm going to set my machine just a little bit larger stitch, about a 2.8, and then I'm just going to sew on that line. Okay, I like doing the TRP lines this way because I don't end up with a knot at the beginning and the end. So now when I come back to cut these out, I don't have to worry about all of the excess threads, all right? So when we actually start cutting them, we're going to take a straight ruler and we're going to cut each one of these right on the line, and then we're going to cut the end off, and then we're going to cut this end off, and this end is actually, I'm going to hold this up so you can see it better, but this end has actually got a little bit of a curve to it, so don't just take your straight ruler and cut it off, because that's the curve at the bottom of the ruler. So we're going to actually take our curved ruler and we're going to lay that right along that edge there, and we're going to trim, and then I'm going to cut the smart corners. And now I'm going to use my ruler again and lay it right on the inside of this piece. And this is almost perfect, but I'm only going to cut halfway. And then I'm going to just adjust it a little bit. And I have a perfect size piece here. You have a little bit of a string here on the back, so we're just going to take our scissors and cut that thread between the two TRP lines so we don't catch it. And then we're going to finish cutting this at a later time. Then we have to go back to this piece right here, and we're going to go through, these have TRP lines as well, but these are a little bit different, all right, because I have 4 layers under this template, and so I can't just sew through them on one. What I have to do is mark each one of these individually, and then I'm going to come back and sew them if I feel like I need to. So in the instructions, it actually tells you to just put a paper clip right there in the middle, and then I'm actually going to clip it again, and that's going to keep my paper from moving. Then I'm going to grab a fold template, and remember, these are on the wrong side of the fabric, and that's why this technique is going to work for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this fold template down right on the TRP lines, and there's actually a long TRP line because I'm going to use the inside of it for the first time when I sew this on, and then the outside of the TRP line is used when we add the last section. So I'm going to bring the whole stack over and fold it over, and then I'm going to bring one piece at a time, and I'm going to mark right along the edge of that template. And what I find a lot of times when I'm working with chalk is by the time I get to where I need that TRP line, the chalk is all gone. So what I like to do is come back and sew on those chalk lines, all right? So we have those marked on that side. We're going to flip it. We're going to bring the whole stack over at one time and then fold back each piece one at a time, and we're marking those lines on the back side of the fabric. So now I can actually just take my paper off, and I'm going to pick the bottom piece off, and I'm going to stitch both of those TRP lines so that you can see how we work with each one. What I like to do is start in the fabric, because if I start on the edge, I always end up with my thread kind of knotting up. So if I start in the middle of the fabric, I don't have to worry about that. And then we're just going to pick up each individual piece, and we're going to sew those lines. Okay, so we will go back and we'll do all 8 of these in a little bit, but this way I don't have to worry about losing my marks in the process of ironing everything, right? So we're going to set these pieces aside for now. All right, we're going to actually get started with the foundation paper piecing. All right, so I'm going to grab my stack here, and I have all of my fabric pieces cut out now. And instead of working with 8 pieces, just because I want to save you guys a little bit of time, I'm only going to work with 4 pieces right now, okay? And in your instructions, every time you pick up a set of instructions and you start working with the paper piecing, it's going to go through this information on how to stack your pieces. So if you look at my stack here, I have everything stacked in order. This is my sew side up here. And when we do our stacking, it always tells you to stack and start with the largest number, put it on the bottom, because that's the last piece you sew on, and then number 1 always goes on the very top. It also tells you to line all the sew sides at the top away from you, because that's what's gonna, those sew sides are gonna match up to the foundation paper when you fold back all your papers on each line. All right. The other thing it tells you in each of your patterns is to trace the back side of your foundation paper. Now, when I'm teaching, a lot of times I tell people, you're going to trace it until you're comfortable not tracing. And once you learn how to position your fabric under your paper, you normally don't need to trace anymore. But on occasion, we have some units that are really hard to figure out where those lines and the fabric is positioned, because they fit in the middle of a paper and you can't use the edges as a guide. And this sheet happens to be one of those that you're going to have that issue with. So I recommend, where this is the first time that you're actually going to do this unit, and it may be the last time you do this unit, just because most of us don't go back and make 5 or 6 quilts, that you take the time to actually trace the back side. And in your instructions, it tells you to trace the dashed line, so that on your front side of your paper you have a dashed line, and it says to transfer that dashed line to the back side. I like to take a Sharpie. Some people like to take a Sharpie. And what they do is they go in and they mark the front side, and then you can see the lines through the back side. And a lot of times you don't need the whole line marked. All you have to do is mark kind of the ends where you need to be. So I marked this piece here, and then I came in and marked the tips of each one of the log cabin diamond pieces. All right, so you'll find it's going to save you a lot of time if you actually will go through and mark these papers, because it's easier to position your fabrics. All right, so we're going to start with our first paper here. We have our stack all set up like this. We have our foundation papers. We have everything marked on the back. All right, we're going to start with the very first piece right here with my color diagram. And we're going to take fabric number 1, and we're going to flip the foundation paper over And because I marked that, all I have to do is just cover that piece. And we're gonna find our glue stick here. And I'm gonna, if I actually took my template piece and matched it up, it tells me exactly where that's gonna fit. And it'll match up if I look at the front side of it. So anyway, I can see exactly where it's gonna go. We're gonna take a little bit of glue and just put a little glue on the back side of the paper. Don't put a lot of glue because that fabric's gotta come off at some point, right? After we get the first one done, then we're gonna take the next one, and we can see, because we marked the lines, exactly where that fabric's gonna go. Then we're gonna take the next piece, and we're gonna put a little bit of glue on it. And then with the next last piece, and a little bit of glue. All right, so we're pretty much done with the glue now, with all of our paper piecing, because the only pieces we actually are gonna glue are the very first one to the paper. All right, the rest of the time we use glue, it's fabric to fabric. So now we're gonna find my fold template, our add a quarter ruler, and a rotary cutter. Your instructions are gonna tell you step by step as you put on the first couple pieces exactly how to position everything. So if you're new to paper piecing, go ahead and read through the instructions, watch the video, and if you have questions and still need some help, you can always ask somebody from one of our certified shops or instructors, or you can go out and ask on our support line how to set this up. So what our instructions tell you is to take your fold template and line it up on line 1, and then we're going to fold the foundation paper back, and then we're going to take and make sure that the fabric is laying flat down on the table. We put the add a quarter ruler. Notice my hands are over here on my fold template, not on my ruler, because I want to hold the template solid to the table. Then all I have to do is just touch the add a quarter ruler and cut. Get all your papers cut, your fabric cut for the first step. Everything's going to be stacked. So we're going to have, if you're doing 8, you're going to have 8 pieces stacked. If you're doing 16, you're going to have 16 of them stacked. Right? So now we're going to bring these back, and we're going to pick our very first or second piece up, and it says section 2 on here. So if I actually looked at my foundation paper here, it's going to tell me that that's section 2. Okay? And if I need to remind myself what color it is, I can always reach to the bottom and grab my paper and check to make sure I'm putting the right color on. So it doesn't hurt if you're new to this. I have a sew side right here. So I'm going to take the paper clip off. I'm going to leave the sew side or the template right there because it has my sew side. But one thing I want to show you is this template where I marked everything right here. My template is exactly the size, just a little bit larger than that, because we always add the extra room to it, right? So if I use my template as a guide, I can see basically where I need to position that piece. So I'm going to pick up my fabric. I'm going to put it right side up on the table. I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to hold this fabric to the paper, and I'm going to center that section that I've drawn out right over the top of the fabric. Then we're going to take the next piece and we're going to lay that right down on top of my paper. I'm going to take another piece. I'm going to find where my ends are. So I have to have fabric at those points. And then I'm going to lay the next piece down on there like that. And then we do that again. And notice that I'm holding on to this and I have these fingers just kind of moving here. That's so that I can hold the fabric. I put my fingers onto that bottom piece so it's not moving underneath there. And when you're new to paper piecing, that's really clumsy to get used to that, but you have to be able to hold on to the fabric. If you just try to set it down, the fabric's going to move as you're trying to slide it. So you have to put your fingers down on there and hold on to it. All right, so now we have all 4 of those stacked. As a beginner, it's really hard to pick this up, get it to the machine without that fabric moving. And when you're working with a really big piece of paper and little tiny fabric pieces, it also is hard to hold on to them. So what I like to do is take, this is a fabric loop pin, and I actually just take and I fold back the fabric right along the paper or the top piece, and I put a little bit of glue along those edges. That's right in the seam allowance. And then I pick up the next one, fold that seam allowance back, put glue between them, do the third one. And I like to do this all the way through my stacks. If it's a small piece of paper, I normally won't do that because I can hold on to it. But when it's a really big piece of paper like this, it's hard to get a hold of. So now when I pick it up, I don't have to worry about my stuff coming because it's attached. So my edges are sewn. So now we can pick this up. We're going to go to our machine. I'm going to reset my stitch length right now to about 1.9 on this machine is going to work. Now I can pick up my first piece. If you have a machine that actually has thread cutter on it, you're gonna love it when you're working with these papers. If you don't, then you're gonna have to figure out how to work from one page to the next, right? So I'm actually gonna start sewing right here on line 1, and I want to start just before line 1, so I'm kind of crossing over. There's a dashed line there. And I want to start just a little bit before that dashed line, and then I'm going to stitch down line 1. Now I'm going to sew to the end and go just past the dashed line. Then we're going to pick up the next paper, and I'm just going to take this and slide the first paper over, and then we're going to sew again. Cut our thread. Now we're going to find our scissors, and we're going to cut the threads between the paper and restack them. And now we're going to go over to the ironing board. So what we want to do is we want to take this and press this direction like this. And you're going to just take your iron, put it on. You want a little bit of steam, and you want to make sure that you open up that seam along there. You don't want to get any folds in there. All right? Then we're going to pick up the next piece, and we're going to press that one. If you have too much steam, it's going to curl your paper. So you want to make sure your paper is just going to lay flat like that. We're going to take the last piece there. All right, so now we should have, they look just like that. We're back at our sewing machine, and we're going to actually start on line 2 now. So we got to take our fold template. You want to make sure that your fabric is laying flat underneath there. We're going to place the fold template on line 2, and then you're going to fold the fabric, or the paper and the fabric back. So if you look, I've got the fabric, and then I'm going to just tear back on the fabric to loosen those stitches right there. We grab the add-a-quarter roller, the rotary cutter, and we're going to trim that off. And when I actually was sewing, I sewed past those dashed lines, and by doing that, that's going to cut all my thread, so now I don't have any tails from my thread. Okay, we have all 4 of our pieces done now. Now we're going to add fabric number 3. So I'm going to grab the third piece of fabric, find the sew side, and lay it down onto my table with the sew side away from me. Then I just pick it up, right side up, and I'm going to put my fingers right along the edges, hold on to it, hold the fabric onto the table, and line that up. I want to make sure that I have fabric past this edge and fabric past this edge. And what I'm folding back on are the lines that are marked. All right, we're ready to actually go back to our machine and sew on line 3. All right. I'm not going to make you watch me sew the rest of these. What we're going to do is move on to our next, doing the curved seams. All right, so we have all of the pieces sewn on now, all of our strips. And so our next step it's going to tell us to do is to actually come and add the basting stitch line along this side. So if you look here, I've already sewn that basting stitch line, which we showed you how to do that in our first video. The other thing we have to do is we have to come in and sew some TRP lines as well. Okay? After we get that done, then we're going to take the pieces, and they're the template pieces. And we want to start, I'm going to look really quick, with section 12. So I'm going to find the template pieces for section 12. And I'm going to show you how to sew this piece on. So I've already sewn all of the TRP lines. And this is the wrong side of the fabric facing up because I left my template on so I didn't lose track of which is a right and wrong side. Now we're going to take our glue pin here and we're going to add a little bit of glue right along that basting line. Okay. We don't really have to trim this off because we can trim all of that excess fabric off after we get through sewing this first line. So now we're going to actually take our basting TRP lines and we're going to fold it back about 1/4 of an inch and match it right at 1/4 of an inch right there. And then I'm going to glue those pieces in place. The reason I'm folding it back at 1/4 of an inch is because the TRP lines on here are actually an X seam line. So I have to find where they cross and match them up at that point. So by folding it back, I can see exactly where those would hit if they were seam allowance. Now so this is what it's going to look like, and it's all glued along that edge. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to the machine, and I'm actually going to put this piece down at the bottom so that that's going to be next to the feed dogs, and I'm going to sew on this side. All right. You may find that if you go to the iron and actually steam this a little bit, it'll probably lay down a lot flatter for you. So I'm going to go to my iron. What we do with the iron is we actually are just going to take the iron and hold the iron a little bit and just put some steam along there and make sure that it's flat along the edges. And the other thing that iron's going to do is it's going to dry that glue so that my piece doesn't come off in the sewing process. So we're going to place the paper up, the fabric down, and we're going to find the sew line 12, and we're going to start sewing. And we want to make sure that our stitch length is down. There we go. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold my paper up a little bit, because if I lay it down, then the feed dogs don't have any way of pulling that fabric through without causing puckers. So if I hold it up like this, when I sew, the fabric's just going to flow right underneath there and I don't end up with any puckers. And I have it's sewn perfectly along that line. Sew a little bit slow, you don't need to go really fast with this. Now we're gonna sew, we're gonna stop. And now I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna press this. See how nice that piece looks? All right, so now we have this excess fabric under here and we need to deal with that right now. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually take this and pull this away from my paper a little bit here. And then I'm gonna lay it down with the fabric against the table. And I'm gonna take my rotary cutter and I'm gonna trim it right along the edge of that basting stitch line. And now that's gonna leave me a nice clean 1/4 inch line underneath that piece, all right? So we have the first piece on, now we have to put the second piece over here. So before we can do that, we have to sew a basting stitch line. So a lot of my students ask me why I put these basting stitch lines here. The reason why is because we're doing a curved seam. When we do paper piecing with a straight seam, we use the outer 1/4 ruler, we fold back against the template. But on these, we have no way to fold back against a curved template. So we need the basting stitch line to know exactly where to glue those pieces onto. This gives us our 1/4 inch as well. So I'm looking for the template piece for section 13, which is template AL13, and I'm reading this off of the back of my paper. So we're going to reach over here, we're going to find our AL13. And I want to make sure that I have the wrong side up. So I'm going to flip this over to make sure I have wrong side facing up. And it looks like it needs to be like this, because I'm watching the template. So I'm going to find my TRP lines. Now we're going to take our piece here and we're going to glue this on. Again, you're going to take your glue pen and you're going to run it just on the inside of that basting stitch. And don't get too much glue on it to where it's sticking out, because if you put too much glue on it, you're going to see the glue after you do the sewing. So it's got to be a pretty thin piece there of glue. So now I'm going to fold back my line, my fabric, and I'm going to match where those two seams cross. And then we're going to glue it on again. Press the fabric into the glue so it doesn't move. We're going to do the next line. And you need to be a little careful not to overstretch that, because this is all biased, and if you pull on it, it's going to stretch it. So when we're done, it's going to look like this. Now, again, we're going to go to the machine and we're going to place this fabric down and start sewing. We're on sew line 14. Notice how I'm holding the paper. I'm going to flip it over and check to make sure I don't have any puckers in there, and then we're going to press. And when you're done, it should look like the picture in the pattern. Now we're going to fold this back and we're going to go ahead and trim that piece again, that excess fabric off of there again. So we're just going to tear make sure that it's not sewn anywhere. Okay, so now we're going to find our ruler here. This is our 12-inch wave ruler, and we're going to lay it down right along the outside edge of the paper. I'm going to trim that one. You're going to have to adjust the ruler just a little tiny bit as you go around that curve. We're going to cut our smart corner at the top. And then we're going to find a straight ruler. I like the Creative Grid rulers because they have this stuff on the bottom and it sticks to the paper and it keeps it from sliding. All right, so now we're ready to add the outside pieces to finish off the top part of the star, all right? Okay, I have two template pieces. One of them is T-template AL1, and it's gonna fit on there like that. This says T-template AL2, and it fits on like this. So we have to put on AL1 first, and then we put on AL2. The paper is on the back side, okay? So when we actually set this up, we want this to go out here like this, and we do have our TRP lines. Actually, we need to re-sew these two. I need to sew 4 more TRP lines, so let me do that before we go forward with this. Okay, so T-template AL1 goes along section 12. It goes onto the side where section 12 is. And we're going to remove the paper now from the back of this. And we don't want to let go because we want to make sure that we have our wrong side up. And I'm working with batiks, so that's hard to tell. And now this piece is going to go on like that. We're going to start right down here, and we're going to add some glue, and we're going to match up the bottom. And there's a smart corner there. Then we're going to put some glue along the edge, and we're going to fold the top template piece back about 1/4 of an inch and line it up to the TRP line. So now it should be a straight line like that. Once you get it lined up, then you're going to glue that edge. And then we're going to put glue on the next part of it, go up to the next TRP line, fold 1/4 of an inch back on your template piece, and line it up with the TRP line, and then glue it along the edge. And then we're going to finish off the top part, and we're going to match, and you will have a perfect match. So you shouldn't have any fabrics hanging over. So if you look at the back side, it's perfect here, it's perfect here. And now we're going to actually sew on the back side of the taper. But I'm going to hit this with a steam iron again to kind of shrink that to lay flat. Alright, so now I'm going to sew on the back side and right along the edge of that line. Now we're going to go press this with our iron. And if you put it on correctly, see that our TRP lines are all going to match up perfectly. All right. We're going to add the next template piece, and this is T-template AL2. And we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to start down here. I'm going to match that perfectly along the end. That's why we add our smart corners for you guys, so you know exactly where to set it. We're going to fold back 1/4 of an inch and set that that line up to match up. We're going to take that, glue that in place. And then I'm going to just double check it. Before I sew, I'm just going to double check and make sure everything's looking the way it's supposed to look, and it does. So then we're going to go hit that with the steam iron. See how nice and flat that's looking? So that makes it a little bit easier to do the sewing. And then we're going to sew this piece on. I'm going to go back to the iron. And now we have a finished piece. After we get all of these pieces done, we can go back and pull the papers off at one time. Okay. And that's it for our demos today. And you guys have some homework to do. So you need to go home, get the rest of these pieces made, so that when we do our last video, you can sew your quilt together. All right, thank you for joining us today. Bye.
Using the information in today's workshop, you should now be able to complete 16 woven star blocks. The amethyst quilt includes all 16 blocks made in the same colorway. If you are using Quiltster and get more creative, don't forget to reference your Quiltster strip cutting information to prepare your units properly. Please work to complete all 16 blocks before the next work sessions, which will be held on November 17th, 2018 at noon Mountain Time. We are excited to see the progress all of our students are making. Before we leave you today, we have a couple notes we want to make that will help you prepare for the next workshop. First, please note that you will be using the foundation papers that look like razors, units AG2 and AG3. However, students that are working ahead and cutting in advance have been a bit confused on why their units don't look like the solid pieces in the pattern that don't have piecing. You will use your foundation papers as T-templates and you will not piece them for this project. Judy will show you how in the next video. There is information in your pattern on this on page 6 and 7 underneath the alternative layout number 3 in the Razor Star booklet. We did have to make some corrections to this section, so make sure to find the corrections page on the website to get the best information for how to handle those pieces. Or simply cut the strips as directed on page 3 of the Amethyst booklet and wait for Judy's tutorial to walk you through the steps. The information on where to look for this is also included on page 2 of the Amethyst booklet under Helpful Hints. If you are making the background pieces using the blank background queen, we will demonstrate cutting and assembly steps in the final video as well. If you have decided to make the spiked ring background queen background option, we will not be covering this directly in the workshop. Also, please note that you will need to purchase additional fabric for this version if you have already purchased a kit and want to add that option, and that the cutting information is not outlined in the Amethyst strip cutting booklet on page 3. So please don't cut fabric B1 using the information presented there. Please refer to your spiked ring background queen for the correct strip cutting information, which is included in the unit chart. If you have chosen to make your quilt larger, there are 2 options available to you. In Judy's quilt sample she is making in the video, the kitting sheet shows a blue border around the outside. This is optional, but easy to complete using a mitered border process. If you have never done one of these, there are plenty of videos on the internet that can show you how. If you want a paper pieced border, we review this option in the pre-class preparation video and note that you will need to buy an extra booklet of papers to accomplish this. So, please review your choices accordingly. Both borders would increase the quilt to 100 inches by 100 inches. We hope you are enjoying these workshops and find them helpful to making your amethyst quilt. Please don't forget to join the Quiltworks Support Network on Facebook or to leverage the experience of your local quilt shops and certified instructors if you need extra help with any of the steps along the way. We will see you on November 17th for the final workshop.